Participating. When you finally go silent, everything shifts. The moment you stop trying to explain yourself, prove your worth, or win her back through constant words, a quiet kind of power begins to rise within you. Silence doesn't mean indifference, it means control. Participating, it's a language that says more than arguments, texts, or late night calls ever could. You see, when you step back and stop feeding a situation with constant attention, you give the other person space to feel your absence. And that absence speaks volumes. Participating, it forces her to confront a reality where your energy, presence, and attention no longer orbit around her. Most men don't understand this. They panic when they feel distance growing. They chase harder, call more, participating, and send long messages hoping to fix what's already broken. But that only pushes her further away because it confirms her power. When you stay quiet, you take that power back. Silence creates uncertainty, and in that uncertainty, participating, attraction begins to breathe again. She starts to notice the change. Not through what you say, but through what you don't. She begins to sense that your emotional energy has shifted. You're no longer reacting. Participating, you're no longer trying to convince her to see your value. You've stopped participating in the emotional tug of war that she thought she controlled. The moment you stop explaining and defending yourself, you reclaim your self-respect. Participating, silence forces her to reflect on what she's lost. It makes her feel what life is like without your emotional support, without your attention constantly affirming her importance. That's when she begins to feel something new. Doubt. Participating, she starts to wonder if you're really gone this time, if you've truly let go, if you found peace in your absence. And that curiosity is powerful because it turns the emotional tables. But silence isn't just about her, it's about you too. Participating, it's a mirror that shows you how strong you've become. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You want to reach out, you want to say something, but that's your old emotional habit fighting back. Participating, when you learn to sit with that discomfort and let silence speak for you, you grow. You build patience, self-control, and discipline. You realize that peace doesn't come from fixing others, it comes from controlling your response. The longer you remain silent, participating, the more you feel your strength returning. You stop being reactive and start being grounded, and that's when she truly notices the shift from emotional chaos to calm confidence. She can feel it even without a word being said. Participating, the silence begins to make her think. It makes her miss the version of you that once cared too much, but now she's unsure if that version still exists. That's when silence does its work. It rebuilds respect without effort, creates curiosity without strategy. Participating, it shows strength without words. The truth is, silence is not distance, it's dignity. It's a quiet reminder that your peace will always be more valuable than any argument, any text, or any chase. Participating, she expected you to break first because that's what always happened before. She believed your emotions would overpower your logic, that the silence would eat away at you until you couldn't take anymore. In her mind, participating, you were supposed to be the one who would reach out, apologize, or make excuses just to keep the connection alive. That's the pattern she grew comfortable with. You chasing her, pulling away, you trying harder, participating, and her feeling secure in the idea that you would never actually walk away. But this time was different. This time you stayed quiet. You didn't chase, didn't text, didn't check in. And that's when the real shift began. When you refused to break first, participating, she was forced to see a version of you she wasn't prepared for. A man who could control his emotions instead of being controlled by them. She may have thought your silence was temporary, that sooner or later you give in and fall back into your old patterns. Participating, but when days turned into weeks and your energy remained calm, something in her started to feel uneasy. The silence wasn't just quiet anymore, it was unsettling and challenged her assumptions. It made her realize that maybe she overestimated her hold on you. Parts is where most men fail. They mistake silence for a tactic instead of a transformation. They think staying quiet is a way to get her attention, not realizing that real silence comes from strength, not strategy. Participate. And if you're just being silent to provoke a reaction, she'll feel that. But when your silence comes from true emotional detachment, when you're genuinely at peace, whether she comes back or not, that's when it starts to affect her deeply. Participating, she can sense that shift because the energy between you has changed. You're no longer acting from neediness or fear. You're grounded, composed, and centered in your self-worth. Participating, she expected you to fold because she believed you needed her validation to feel okay. But when you stopped trying to explain, stopped apologizing for things that weren't your fault, participating, and stopped trying to make her see your value, she was left with silence that felt heavier than any argument could. That silence started to work against her expectations. It made her wonder if you had moved on, if you had found peace somewhere else, participating, or maybe even someone else. And that uncertainty becomes powerful. It creates a space where she begins to miss what she once took for granted. Your silence exposes what words can never reveal. Who really holds emotional control? It's not about punishing her, participating. It's about proving to yourself that you can remain strong even when you care. You've shown that your emotions don't dictate your actions, your discipline does. That's the kind of strength that earns respect, not just from her, but from yourself. Participating because in the end, the one who stays calm when the other expects chaos always wins. Silence tests you in ways words never can. When you decide not to reach out, not to react, not to chase, Participating, you step into an emotional battlefield where your opponent isn't her, it's your own mind. The urge to break the silence comes from a deep need for reassurance, the desire to feel seen, heard, and understood. But the truth is, participating, every time you give in to that urge, you surrender your power. The emotional battle of self-control begins the moment you decide to do nothing, because silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're choosing peace over panic. Participating, it's the quiet war between your impulses and your growth. Every second you resist the temptation to text, to explain, to fix what feels broken, you're training your emotions to serve you instead of sabotage you. That's real strength. Participating, it's not about pretending you don't feel anything, it's about feeling everything and still choosing restraint. Most people can't handle that kind of pressure. They need immediate relief. They need to fill the silence with words. Participating, but you're learning that silence itself can be healing. It gives you space to breathe, to observe, to remember who you were before the drama, before the emotional chaos clouded your sense of self. At first, it feels unbearable. Your mind runs wild. Participating, convincing you that maybe she doesn't care, maybe she's already moved on, maybe you're making a mistake by staying quiet. But that's just your emotional conditioning talking. Participating, you've spent so long attaching your peace to a response that silence feels like punishment. In reality, it's freedom, because for the first time, you're not reacting, you're reflecting. You're not chasing validation, you're choosing self-respect. Participating, the more you lean into that discipline, the more your confidence begins to rebuild from within. Self-control and silence doesn't mean suppressing your emotions, it means mastering them. You acknowledge the pain, the longing, participating, the confusion, but you don't let those feelings drive your behavior. That's emotional maturity. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. And the longer you stay composed, the clearer your mind becomes. Participating, you start to see things for what they truly are, not what your emotions want them to be. You realize that love isn't proven through desperation, it's proven through stability. What she begins to notice isn't your absence, it's your emotional balance. Participating, the man who once overreacted now moves differently. He's calm, grounded, and detached, not out of bitterness, but out of growth. That shift is powerful because it changes the entire dynamic. Participating, the silence that was supposed to make you weak becomes the foundation of your strength. This battle of self-control isn't about winning her back, it's about winning yourself back, because when you master silence, you master emotion, and when you master emotion, participating, you become unshakable. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop allowing your emotions to control you. When you finally reach that stage, something within you shifts. You begin to see things with a new kind of clarity. Participating no longer clouded by the need for approval or attention. You're no longer reacting to every word, every text, every moment of silence. Instead, you move with calm composure, almost as if the chaos that once shook you now passes through you without leaving a mark. Participating, that's what real emotional detachment feels like, not coldness, but control. When you detach emotionally, you stop living in reaction mode. You stop wondering what she's thinking, what she's feeling, or if she's missing you. Because the truth is, participating, none of that matters when you've learned to center your focus on yourself. The silence that once made you anxious now becomes your sanctuary. Participating, you realize that your peace isn't dependent on her presence or absence. It's built on how you handle yourself when things don't go your way. That's where real confidence is born. It's not loud or flashy, it's quiet, steady, and unbothered. Participating, she begins to feel this shift before you ever say a word. The same man who once used to chase her for answers now seems unreachable. You're still kind, still respectful, but there's something different about your energy. It's self-contained. Participating, you're no longer offering endless reassurance or seeking it in return. And that change doesn't just confuse her, it intrigues her, because emotional detachment creates mystery. It makes her wonder what changed, what made you stop reacting. Participating, what gave you this new calmness she can't quite understand? The beauty of detachment is that it removes the emotional power she once had over you. You stop giving her reactions to feed off of. No more over-explaining, no more defending yourself. Participating, no more chasing closure. You've accepted that not everything deserves a response, and not every situation deserves your energy. That's when your silence becomes magnetic. People are drawn to those who can stay centered no matter what happens around them. Participating, it's a rare kind of strength, a quiet authority that says, I'm at peace with whatever comes next. Emotional detachment isn't about manipulation, it's about liberation. It's about choosing to walk away from drama, participating, choosing to let go of what no longer serves you, and choosing to protect your mental and emotional space. You stop living for external validation and start thriving in self-assurance. The more detached you become participating, the more powerful your presence feels, because you're no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. When she feels that shift, it unsettles her. She begins to realize that the emotional connection she once took for granted is no longer in her control. Participating. And that's when silence becomes louder than words ever could. In the end, emotional detachment isn't the absence of feeling, it's the mastery of it. What she truly fears isn't your absence, it's the loss of your energy. Participating, the part of you she once had constant access to. She isn't just afraid of being alone, she's afraid of no longer being the center of your attention, the recipient of your care, your emotional investment. That's what makes silence so powerful. Participating, when you stop chasing, when you step back and allow the quiet to exist, it's not emptiness she feels, it's a void that only you can fill. She begins to notice the patterns she once ignored, the moments she took for granted. Participating, and the depth of your presence that she assumed would always be there. Most women, like most people, become comfortable with what they can rely on. They forget that connection is not guaranteed, that attention is not infinite. Participating in that respect must be earned every day. When you withdraw emotionally, she starts to feel the absence of what was once abundant. She starts to replay memories, reconsider her choices, and question whether she really understood your value. Participating, that fear isn't about losing you entirely, it's about losing the energy, the stability, the care, and the consistency that she once depended on without appreciating it. Your silence amplifies that awareness. Participating, and it forces her to confront emotions she may have been avoiding. The key is that this fear doesn't come from manipulation, it comes from natural human instinct. We are wired to notice when something essential is missing. Partici notices your absence because it disrupts the balance she once controlled. The more calm, composed, and emotionally unavailable you remain, not as punishment but as a reflection of self-respect, the more she begins to feel the weight of what she has lost. Participating, and that weight triggers reflection, curiosity, and eventually respect. It's also important to understand that her fear isn't just about your actions, it's about your presence. When you were fully available, she may have taken that for granted. Participating, but now that you've stepped back, your energy becomes something she can't reach for on a whim. That energy is magnetic, not because you demand it, but because you exist in your own space, grounded in your own value. Participating, she begins to recognize that she doesn't control your emotional state anymore, and that realization unsettles her in a way chasing never could. While she grapples with this fear, you continue to grow stronger. Participating, every moment of silence reinforces your discipline and your emotional independence. You no longer need approval to feel secure. That shift in your own energy is felt by her even when you don't speak. She senses it in your calmness, your lack of desperation. Participating in your ability to remain steady in the face of uncertainty. That fear is not intimidation, it's respect, and it's the kind of respect that comes from knowing your presence cannot be bought or begged for. Ultimately, participating, what scares her most isn't losing you, it's the realization that your energy, your investment, and your focus are now yours alone. That is the silent power that changes everything. Participating and knowing when to speak again and when to remain silent is one of the most important lessons a man can learn in any relationship. Silence is powerful, but it is not absolute. It is not a weapon to be wielded without thought, participating, nor is it a shield to hide behind indefinitely. The moment you break it should never come from loneliness, fear, or the desire to convince her of your worth. It should come from clarity, self-respect, participating, and the understanding that your response is a reflection of your strength, not your neediness. Timing matters because your words will carry weight only when they are spoken from a place of calm composure, not desperation. When she reaches out sincerely, participating, you respond thoughtfully, but with balance. You don't flood her with emotion or try to regain control. You answer with a presence that shows you are unaffected by her absence, yet capable of connection. Participating, that balance between availability and self-respect is magnetic. She begins to see that your life doesn't revolve around her decisions, but that you are willing to engage with authenticity when it serves mutual respect. Participating, the key is not to chase closure or approval, but to simply operate from a place of dignity. By doing so, you set the standard for how you expect to be treated, and she cannot help but notice the shift. On the other hand, if she does not reach out, participating, your silence remains a statement itself. It is not punishment, it is affirmation. It demonstrates that your peace and your focus are non-negotiable. Participating, you've learned that emotional independence is far more important than validation from someone who is inconsistent or unsure. Your quiet composure teaches more than words ever could, and it communicates a strength that is impossible to ignore. Participating, it signals that you value yourself more than the need to be right, more than the need to win her over, and more than the need to chase affection. Mastering the art of when to speak and when to stay silent also shows emotional intelligence. Participating, you begin to understand that not every situation requires a response, and that withholding words does not mean you are weak. It means you are strategic and self-aware. You avoid being dragged into drama, arguments, or emotional chaos. Your restraint reflects a deep understanding of human behavior. People are drawn to stability, not volatility, to calm, not desperation, to confidence, not insecurity. Every pause, every measured response, participating, reinforces your sense of self and communicates your value more effectively than constant engagement ever could. The man who masters silence does not chase closure because he already has it within himself. He does not speak to be heard, but to communicate purposefully, and he does not break silence for approval but for alignment. That level of discipline transforms relationships and perceptions alike. Ultimately, knowing when to speak again is not about control, it is about presence and emotional mastery. Silence is a tool, but only the man who understands its timing uses it to create real lasting impact.